Hello, hello. It's my first monthly. Oh my goodness. Let's see who's here and let me kill the volume. You know how I have to do that. Here we go. Oh, I actually did it really smoothly this time. And just in case there's that weird chat, hi all, where the chat doesn't start. Oh, Tony, you are always the first one here. Every time. There's not been a single live. So there's a throwdown for the rest of you. For the rest of you, next month, I'm going to give a little challenge. Let's see if anyone can beat Tony into the room. I'm betting no. So there. You know what I forgot to do? I forgot to remind people on Instagram last week that we're going to monthly, and I forgot to remind people this morning, but you all are here anyway. So hello from Oregon. Hello from Nyack. It's really rainy up here, isn't it? In New York right now. It's super rainy. It's like, it's that kind of bone chilly day that I put on my unfinished. All I have to do is sew the buttons on. This is the Saugerties cardigan. This is the new cardigan kit. Which, by the way, I might actually hang on to and not publish until August, when you all are in the mood to start knitting fall garments. I decided, since I think I kind of missed my window to get the kit out by, like February. So now I think I might hang on to it and publish it in August, just in time for everyone to start thinking like, oh yeah, I want to knit a Rhinebeck sweater. Because don't you think this would be a fun Rhinebeck sweater? And then we can all have a meetup, right? Because remember, it's got the big pockets. Anyway, all right, just waiting for you guys all to come in the room. So by the way, what do you think about that idea about hanging on to not release the kit until August, until we're all starting to think about fall knitting? And then I was thinking maybe we would do a meetup at Rhinebeck. Hopefully Rhinebeck will be, together again. I'll show you the pockets. I'll stand up, show you the pockets. Oh, I just stood on my mic cord. So hopefully I'm still, look how deep those bad boys are, right? Totally integrated, worked into the ribbing. Okay, anyway. Hopefully you can still hear me because I just stepped on my mic cord. And there is a 30-second delay, so I might not know for 30 seconds if you can't hear me. Gee, I hope you still can. Hold on. Let me see if, can I tell if, yeah, I think I'm still talking. Yes, I think I'd make a good Rhinebeck sweater too. So you think it's okay, even though I teased it and people keep waiting for the new sweater, if I just hang on to it and not publish it for a little bit? I think that's okay. Anyway. Okay. We got to get to it. We got so much to talk about. So first of all, welcome back. Thank you for letting me go to monthly. For those of you who are in the Gramercy Park video sweater class, I've been extremely busy on that. Still have more. Oh, good. You can still hear me. Still have more videos to edit on that. Hey. It is a crazy amount of work. There's so far 850 of you in it, new people joining us all the time. So come on down. I just knocked over a camera. Come on down, join us. But the thing about it being a live course with a teacher that's actually giving individualized help and customization is, holy kermoly, it's about 2 to 3 hours every morning of just keeping on top of the questions. Because for those of you who are not in the class, you might not know this, but my answers aren't short. No one's going to copy a design. There's only, look, there's a knit and there's a purl. I never worry about that. That's neither here nor there. So one of the things that I was doing today was answering some questions about fit, and I got really excited about my guest. And I don't want to tell you too much, but I've been a little bit fan stalkery over her blog. Now, I love her designs. I love the sort of vintage, adorable cropped sweater vibe that is happening in one of the newer sweaters, but I didn't know what an awesome writer she is. So we are going to sort of dig in and talk about how the sausage is made. We're going to talk about patterns. We're going to talk design. We're going to talk a little money. Yeah, that's going to happen. We're going to talk sweater fit. We're going to talk all of that stuff. So without further ado, I'm so excited for everyone to please welcome the one and only Natalie Warner, otherwise known as Natalie in Stitches. Hello.
Hi, Patty.
Welcome.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
The gang's all here. So we have folks from here from Michigan and Oregon and Toronto and Austria and Vancouver, Denmark. So we have a good all over the world representation. Tell us where you are right now.
I'm in London, UK. It's the middle of a very changeable weather day, as is normally the case in this part of the world. Always something to talk about as far as weather's concerned. Yeah.
So just in case anyone thinks she talks funny, that's why. Don't you hate it when Americans do that? Don't you hate it when Americans are like, I love your accent? Because we're such a simple people. We are such, I was just talking to my publisher and they're in the UK. And I said, we're a simple, gentle people without the gentle, but we're simple. But we always like over romanticize and, you know, like an Australian accent or a Greek accent or an Italian, you know, British accent. We're like, oh, I could hear you talk all day. But, you know, do you know Carol Feller?
I've never met her, no, sadly.
She's so lovely. And I love the way she says the word pattern in her Irish accent. It's so adorable.
Oh, yes.
I can't do it, but Pat, I can't do it. Anyway.
No, Irish accent's beautiful. It's so musical. I love it.
So adorable. So I was beginning to tell the people about my most recent stalker obsession about your blog. Yes. Now, how long have you been writing the blog?
Well, I officially started it in about 2013. And then at that, couple of years after that, I got into teaching full time, so I couldn't maintain it. But it wasn't until about coming up for a year or so ago, and I actually felt motivated to write again. I just didn't have the energy to commit to a regular writing schedule. And so I kicked it back up in July. I think I wrote a post on knitting and accessibility. And from there, I thought, okay, I think I can get into this. I found something that I'm happy to just talk about at length, repeatedly. And and then I've just managed to maintain a regular schedule since then. So yeah.
Which is, I can't even wrap my brain around how you do that. How often do you publish? Seems like a lot.
Yeah, every week at the moment, but I think, I know. I think
in a million years, I could never do that.
Yeah, it might go to a seasonal model pay. Don't hold me to it. I mean, I think writing was the only thing that I could really pick out for myself when I was little. You know, when people ask you, what do you want to do when you're small? And I always really liked writing stories and things like that. And so I thought, yeah, I might be a writer. It was anything that I was actually good at, I think, that I really enjoyed.
Wow.
And so writing stuff comes really easily to me. Anything to do with composition is my happy place.
So hard for me. My friend gave me a coffee mug that says, I write best with a gun to my head. I can't. So he's a writer. He's published several books. And he said the only way he can finish a book is if he has fully spent his advance. The advance has to be gone. He has to have spent every penny and then know, oh my God, the money's gone. I can't give the money back. I have to turn in a book. That's it. It's the only way I can do it. So tell the folks, because I've, you know, a little history about what this all is. Oh, I forgot to say this in the intro. I'm so bad at this. This series was originally called Quarantine Live. And where it came from was I used to do a Facebook Live once a month. And then people didn't want to be on Facebook necessarily. So then I moved it to YouTube. And but then in March of last year, when I went into quarantine for what I thought was then 3 to 4 weeks, I thought, oh, I'll just turn on the camera and chat with the people. And then it was weekly for a while, then it became bi-weekly. And last Quarantine Live, I announced that I think it's time for a name change. And I forgot to tell you all this because it felt like we're beginning to turn a corner and shift into the next phase of whatever the future will bring. And I didn't feel like Quarantine Live was the right name for it anymore. And so I asked for suggestions, and I got a suggestion from one of our brilliant guests, our viewers, that said she felt like it was time to move on, and she thought Knit On with Patty. So anyway, this is our first episode of Knit On. But as my viewers have sometimes mentioned, I sometimes just start chatting with someone and people start typing, could the guest tell us a little about themselves, or could they introduce them? So I'm really bad at that. So would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and how we now know about your love of writing? So Knitwear Design, when did that start happening?
Oh gosh. I think Knitwear Design, it was one of the last things that I ever tried as a new thing. I mean, yeah, I know. It always surprises people. Yeah, I mean, first thing that I learned to do was sew. My mom was always making me dresses, and
I knew that from the blog.
Yeah. And so I learned to sew first. Then I tried hand embroidery with little, scraps of Aida, just doing little samplers and things like that. But knitting, I hated as a child. I hated it because it was so slow. And my mum, she said to me, right now, because you're just learning, you're just going to get this cheap squeaky yarn, you're going to get these metal needles, and you're just going to practice just making the stitches work. Now, when I was small, I had very tight tension, and when you had combined tight tension with polyester yarn and metal needles, it's not nice. And yeah, I didn't touch knitting again until I was about 18, and I had no summer job, and I thought, well, I can't think of anything else to do. Let's try this knitting thing again. And I got a jumper out of it. It was okay. But it wasn't until I think it must have been 2006-ish. I really got into it properly after those 2 false starts. And
that's called a sweater in the US for those American folks who are like, what's a jumper? I'm just kidding. By now, we all know what a jumper is.
Yeah. But yeah, so that jumper, and that was another squeaky polyester jobby as well, except it was on 10mm needles this time rather than 4mm needles. So
a big change.
I know. I thought, well, if I'm bad at it, I want it to go quickly. So let's see how that goes. Oh, honestly, it was terrible. But it wasn't until I think I was working in Bloomsbury, and if in London, that's not too far away from Oxford Circus. And if you walk quickly in your lunch break, you can get from there to Liberty's real quick, like about 15 minutes or so if you walk speedily and you know all the cut throughs. And I ended up hanging around the Rowan ladies in Liberty, especially because they had some place to sit down. John Lewis had a place to sit down as well, but it wasn't as comfortable. Liberty had that kind of more chilled vibe, like you're in a cafe, come museum, come emporium, and nobody really minded if you just sat and just knitted and chatted. And so that's what I ended up doing in, little bits in lunch break, and then after work as well, because I finished at around 6 o'clock, and I wanted to wait for the rush hour traffic to go. And it got to the point where I was butchering patterns basically, and it followed, as it happened, the same path that my sewing life had done before I got into knitting, which was that I would find a pattern that I could work with or use as a base, and then just do stuff to it. Like, oh, I like this. I want to change this. I want to change the skirt here. I want this kind of sleeve.
What I call, I like it, but.
Yeah,
I like
exactly.
it, but I wish
Yeah.
it were a V-neck. I like it, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I like it, but is my favorite. That's the sweet spot for knitting to me.
Yeah, that's it. And I liked with knitting because unlike with dressmaking and fabric, the ball of yarn can be anything you like. You're constructing the fabric rather than cutting into it and having to be restricted by what's available for you. And I just love the fact that you can just turn this string into anything.
I know, it's a miracle.
Yeah. And then it got to the point where I felt I would like to see what I wanted to do with it. I thought, I'm practically designing stuff now. The stuff is no longer, it doesn't resemble the original thing anymore. So maybe I should try and learn how to design from scratch. And so at that point, I think I was in my mid-20s, I think it was about 26-ish, I think. I decided I'd enroll onto a design course at London College of Fashion. It was just a design stuff. I thought, let me just see how designing works in industry terms, that kind of training, rather than just
specifically a knitwear design class, or just garment design? Okay.
Yeah, just straight fashion. I mean, I did do design knitwear things as part of that course, but I did not have a lot of support with it. There were exactly two instructors on that course who could knit. One was a machine knitter, the other one was a hand knitter. And the two of them just sort of liked sniping at each other in that silly way that machine and hand knitters like to. And so I know. And so I ended up doing this cape. It was inspired by giblets. And that's something else. I can get back onto that if you want. It was an interesting one. And I just thought, well, I'll write a pattern. I'll write it as I think it can be written. I will turn it in. And so in went this bit of lined paper with my handwritten lines, like row 1, row 2.
Handwritten?
Yeah, I know. They let me hand in a handwritten knitting pattern. And then the machine knitting tutor said, yeah, give it to X, see if she can still remember how to read knitting patterns and how they work. I know, so catty. But she was the only one who could mark it anyway. And it came back with a tick on it. And after that, I thought, well, maybe let me see if I can publish things. And so I think about 3 years later, because after that, I think within 3 years, I was working for a yarn company like you had. And I thought, let me try and publish my own stuff. And bearing in mind at this time, I had jack all idea of how it worked. I did not know about technical editors. I did not know about grading. I did not know about anything. But luckily, I had the sense to not do garments. I just did accessories.
See, I went right to sweaters.
Did you?
Like literally the very first design I ever published, a sweater.
Oh,
I'm an idiot.
No, well, that was what happened to me after this. I mean, my first thing that got picked up by Knitting Magazine was a sweater. I can't say jumper, but
you can say whatever you like. So we had a question I wanted to ask if jumper was male or female. No, jumper is just sweater.
Yeah,
just a sweater.
Yeah. But the accessories collection, it kind of tanked because I didn't have time to promote it. So I had the accessories done. My idea of editing was just reading them repeatedly, changing the font in Word so that I'd pick up mistakes, because that's a nice little copy editing trick you can do. Change the font to Comic Sans and suddenly everything becomes more apparent, mistakes and things like that.
Oh, I don't know that trick.
Yeah, oh, it worked beautifully. I mean, I did my degree is in English literature, hence the writing. Any chance to write I took. That was what I originally studied. And when you're churning out essays all the time, you pick up these things. Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm going to ask my husband. My husband's a copy editor. And I wonder if he knows that trick, because, the whole thing is, and I think I understand why the trick works. the reason I need another human to read it is my eye reads what I think is there,
Yeah.
not what's there. So I wonder if the effect of changing the font helps with that.
Yeah.
You're no longer seeing what you think is there.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing what's there.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's interesting. Never heard
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, it works for me. Hopefully it'll work for you. I mean, but it's funny that you mentioned the sweater thing being your first published design, because that was an idea I had at the same time I did that little collection that is buried in the underground of Ravelry somewhere, because I never talked about it, and hardly sold any as a result. But the first one that was picked up by Knitting, that was a jumper, and that was a baptism of fire, just like you said, because I did not know that I would have to also grade the pattern. And I was like, oh, that's not how it works in dressmaking world. You give that to someone else generally.
Oh,
Yeah. So until I tried knitting, I'd done a couple of placements. One of them was at a tailor's in Islington and things like that. And what happens in small businesses like that is that you create the master pattern, which is what, we would do, our just first pattern that you knit the sample from. And then if it's a sewing pattern, you then send it to a grading bureau, and you can then send them your grade rules, and you say, this is the size range I want, these are the grade rules I'm using, and that's what you give them if you don't want them to apply their own. And then magically they generate a pattern, they can digitize it for you. And because I knew nothing, I thought it must be the same for knitting, because
only
they're
for
making
Vogue.
clothing patterns too.
Only for Vogue Knitting, the magazine Vogue. That is
Yeah.
still how it is for Vogue. They have in-house grading.
Ah.
But they're like the magazine that I used to work with the most when I was doing magazine work. But even with Vogue, I would give them my grading. I would give them like a one sheet grading thoughts. So, like if I had thought through, a motif, and that I think, this should get wider here, I just give them their notes, but then they do the actual grading. But every other magazine, I used to work for 7 different magazines at one insane point, and they were the only ones that did the grading. All the other magazines, you turned it in fully graded.
Yeah, that is intense. I mean, and yeah, I don't know how you did it. I don't know how I did it, because I think about 7 years of producing patterns and doing my own grading, it completely did my head in. I thought, oh my
Well, I
God.
still do. I mean, now that I primarily self-publish, I still do all my own grading. I don't have a technical editor to do that. I do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Gosh.
It is a lot. So what made you start? What happened one morning when you woke up and said, I'm going to write this needle to needle series, which is the blog series that I became obsessed with, which is all about every single aspect of what we do. How does it go from a ball of yarn to a pattern that you're holding in your hand as a knitter? So you woke up one morning and thought, I'm going to write this.
Yeah, I was just really fed up, to be honest. I just felt like, I think it's been about over 7 years since I first published something, and I felt like it's not as long as, many people that are designing, but I felt like I had to say something, because I didn't think that anybody else was going to. And I thought, it can't possibly be just me who's noticed this. How on earth is everyone else coping? And how have they managed to do it for this long? And survive, basically, even without raising some of these issues around quality control, about how you get the support, how do you find the time to design? Because I could only imagine that, if you're designing and self-publishing like you are, you're doing, the designing takes up a mere fraction of your time compared to the other tasks that you have to do. It's about 10% probably, maybe, guessing, I don't know.
Not even, I would guess not even.
Yeah. And
tiny.
I think the experience that I had with Arnold Culliford Knitwear, Jen and Jem, when I did their Something to Knit Together winter edition towards the end of last year, that was the first time that I had had somebody grade the pattern and have a team of people editing it as well. And I really felt safe. It changed something in me, really, because I thought, this is what I thought it would be like in the first time. It's not that you want to be carried necessarily, but you just want someone who's going to check your work, someone who works with you collaboratively and says, you know, maybe, you know, why don't you try this? I think this might be a good idea. Because, you know, design, it's always a team effort. One of the things that I really dislike about the way that, you know, fashion is reported on generally is that you have this idea of the designer being this omniscient magical figure who comes up with all the ideas.
Yeah.
And which is bollocks, because that's not how it goes at all. It's a team, it's a studio for a reason. You don't have a studio of one.
Right.
And you know, even if you do double duty like you do with the grading and designing, you still need to have other people around you to help you market it, and, you know, talk to your customers, your knitters, your community that you've built up. It's not a one person show. And that experience of working with Jen and Jim, I just thought, this is how it should be, because it was the first time that any of my work had come out that I really felt comfortable and confident that it was as good as it could be. Because when you do the magazine stuff, you know, you design it, you grade it, it goes to the tech editor, and you both do the best you can with it. And I just think, what if I'd had more time? What if I'd had more than a month to knit the sample? What if I'd had a bit more leisure time to look over the pattern, maybe change things? Because you're so reactive when you work for publications.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're more generous with the time, but when you're
a fast turnaround. US magazines it's often like 21 days from the time they order the yarn, not when you get it, but when they order the yarn to when you hand the pattern over.
Oh, goodness. Wow.
And the sample. Yeah, it's fast. And that's why, you know, I explain to people all the time who get annoyed with errata in magazines. And I say, that's the deadline. That's the deadline of magazines. When I self-publish, there was a design that I made a fundamental conceptual boo-boo on.
Yeah.
And this was Harbor Springs that ended up being released a full season after I had originally thought I was going to release it, because I just, the geometry of how these stitches moved, and the fact that I wanted the top of the triangle to be right at the armhole shape for every size. And I made a fundamental mathematical error in conceiving of that.
Yeah.
And as I was knitting it, I realized it was ending up too long. And then I had my aha moment of geometry of like, oh my God. And I looked, and I was at a retreat called Knitwear Love, run by Amy Herzog. And I remember sitting at a table with Amy Herzog, and I think Kate was there, and it might've been, I think it was Laura Nelkin that year. And I said, okay, well, here are the options. I either delay the whole launch of the video sweater class, or launch something else in its place and put a pin in this and bring it out next year. And then I went to Amy's room and we talked it through, and she did that very nice, like, she's so sweet. And she's like, well, so, I mean, I think it looks fine the way it is. Like, you could say it was tunic length, but show me how you wanted it to look. And so I kind of hiked it up and I showed her the proportions of how I wanted it to look. And she was like, well, that's better. I like that better. And I said, okay, that's what I needed to know. I need to put a pin in this.
Yeah.
But if it was for a magazine and I had made that conceptual error, it's being published.
Yeah.
So I try to let people know, you're going to see less errata and self-published, because we're on our own clock.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just going to put the light on, Patty. The thunderstorm cloud is just.
How very exciting. I'm going to go back and look at the comments. Oh, Megan said just read the blog post the other day. It was incredible. Megan, do you mean the brand newest one? Because I'm going to talk about that one. Because there's a lot. Wow, we really have people from all over the place.
Oh.
So we have some of your blog fans. So today's was it written today or did I just read it today?
No, it was written today.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, well, then I'm finger on the pulse then. Because now where I find out fastest is on Twitter. I don't know why I have a tendency to see your blogs first over there, even faster than Instagram, because I follow you over there too. But I don't know. Anyway, I saw it on Twitter this morning and I immediately clicked over to read it. And what was so interesting is this was what I was about to tell you before we went on camera. And then I was like, no, I'm going to tell it to you on. It was about shape is not size.
Yeah.
So it was such a simple, fundamental truth that as much as I've talked about size and as much as I've written, and all my video sweater classes are always about, you pick your base size, and that's where we begin our journey. Because, and in my live in-person classes, I always do this bit where I'm, like if there's 30 people in a room, it's Vogue, and I say, okay, everyone take a second and look about the room. Mm-hmm. And I always say, okay, do you think there's more than 6 to 8 to 10, even 12 different shapes and sizes of people here in the room? Okay. So my spiel, as I always say, a knitting pattern is not instructions on how to make that thing. It is simply a handful of examples. That's all it is. A couple of examples of how that design might be achieved if you match the stitch and row gauge and magically matched every dimension. But I've never talked about it. I've never used those words. I've always talked about, like, for instance, hi, my name is Patty, extra small chest, medium waist, large hips. What size shall I knit? But then I'm still talking size. Mm. But you made it so clear. And I said to my marketing team today, I want to write a new introduction to some old blog posts about ease and link back to that pattern and really link back to your blog. I mean, because you brought in the word shape, not size.
Yeah.
Shape. So do you think that clarity for you comes from the sewing world? That knitwear designers are all right here. Our business is like right up in our face. And so we don't have the time to step back always.
Yeah.
But sewing is so different because the fabric doesn't move and stretch the way knitwear does. So like a sleeve cap is symmetrical in knitting, but it's not in sewing.
Yeah.
So sewing patterns, you went into a lot on the blog that I didn't know about the information that's provided before you purchase a sewing pattern.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, some of the sewing pattern companies could be a lot better. But again, it's the indies again, who are not churning out loads of patterns like, say, Butterick or Vogue might do. They give you lots of information to work with. And some of them, they actively encourage people to take their measurements. And it's beginning to make a dent with people. I mean, you just have to. I think because sewing is more immediate, you see the finished pieces and you have an idea of how it fits holistically. And because things are mapped out differently, you begin to understand the relationship between how you are and how the pattern is. You're thinking, well, this has to fit together like that, and that has to relate to me in X or such and such a way. And with knitting, you don't have that visual reference really. You have a set of instructions that's like a program or script that you try your best to follow, these lines of code. And I realized a while ago that the sewing is helpful for that, because when you make clothes, it's obviously a lot quicker, but then you get to understand, how stuff should look and what it should measure, where for it to be a good fit for people. So it was like, for example, raglan sleeves. When I teach that one at Vogue, that
seamed raglan or top
a
down?
seamed one, bottom up, that one.
Can we get a high five on seamed raglan? What I'm wearing right now, FYI.
Yeah.
Deeper armhole, because I wanted this to be almost like the ability to be an outdoor coat, like that for fall and spring. You know, so totally different fit, more athletic fit, blah blah. But seamed,
yeah,
we can control the shaping and have a different rate of shaping for body and sleeve.
Exactly. It's perfect. And you get better fit that way. There are so many people I have met who hate raglans or top downs because they don't fit. And it's because, you know, you need to take proper account of the shoulder shaping here. And as you said, the lower armhole to get that range of movement in, because the ease that is normally at the top for a set-in sleeve has to then get redistributed along the seams of the raglan. It has to be spread in a different way. And if you don't account for that when you draft it, then it's not going to fit nicely. It's going to start pulling at the neck. It's going to start doing all sorts of weird things. But
people think that raglan means top down. So the only experience they've ever had is an armhole that's down to here because they have a larger chest and they are doing a badly written pattern that keeps increasing until you're at your chest count. And then your armhole's at your waist.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is not necessarily where you want them to be.
No.
But yeah, I mean, the sewing has helped a lot. And I think definitely this is the case with seam. I know a lot of knitters hate seaming and, you know, but yeah, but sometimes it's necessary. I mean, there's so much there. You can do fun things and you can pick up stitches and knit down. You can do all sorts of lovely engineering things. But sometimes you just have to sew pieces together if you want something that is not a dropped straight shape.
Right.
And
it's such an easy thing to do, seaming. And I gave a presentation at Webb's over the weekend called Patty's Big Box of Knitting Fails, because I'm self-taught. And so I talked about all the terrible things I've ever done. Mm-hmm. And one of the sweaters that I I showed in the presentation is the same one that I wrote about on Modern Daily Knitting, where I looked back at my Rav notes and as a, you know, before I was a designer, when I was a knitter, and I couldn't believe the 8 million hoops I jumped through to try to avoid a seam, and that the garment was knit in negative ease, all rib, and seamed. Well, seamed for a reason, you know. So I converted it into the round. It's in negative ease, it's ribbed. The whole thing just torqued around my body as I walked like a cheap tube sock. And I wore it once. So I put all this effort into doing, you know, oh, and then I'm going to do top down sleeve cap. And then that was bunchy. And then, oh, I'm going to keep the neck stitches live, because why bind them off only to pick up stitches? And then my neck all stretched out. So all these hoops that I jumped through to avoid a mattress stitch and picking up stitches and setting a sleeve. And I spent months knitting a sweater that I wore once because it would look terrible. How dopey.
No, well, it's it. I mean, I had a similar lapse not too long ago. I saw a lot of people knitting a very popular top-down pattern, and I normally swear off top downs completely because they don't suit me at all, and also because they are what they are. And so, against my better judgment, I knitted this pattern. And I thought, oh, it's really pretty. You know, maybe it will work. Maybe it will be different. It was not different. It was awful. I finished it, and I don't even know if I want to give it away to someone who might like it. I don't even know if I want to unravel it. I'm just so cross with myself because I know better, and I got sucked in, and I knitted it anyway, and I just don't want to know.
You know, a friend of mine used to always say it's as important, maybe more important, to know what you don't like than to know what you like.
That is true.
So I feel like someone typed in the chat when I did this web's presentation, like, what made you go on when you made so many mistakes? I mean, because I just showed failed project after failed project, like all the hot mess of a self-taught knitter. And I said, well, when we went into quarantine, my husband, just like a lot of people, started, I'm going to learn how to bake bread, right? And if you watch the Great British Baking Show, Paul Hollywood sometimes talks about, that's not being a good bake. It came out more like a pitta, he always says, like when it's really flat. And so David was basically baking pittas. They were not bread, but he kept at it. So I said, bottom line is, if you want the bread, you keep at it. And I wanted the bread.
Yeah.
So like, I kept trying, but if I wasn't such a spectacular failure, then I wouldn't have become the teacher that I am, because I had to teach myself everything. I mean, I did joke that I'm glad they put it at the end of the retreat, because I was worried if I did this presentation at the beginning, Kathy and Steve would be overwhelmed with people typing, can I cancel my class with Kelly because she's a really bad knitter. But now I'm a really good knitter because of that.
Exactly.
So I wondered when I read all about shapes, how much of that came from your knowledge of sewing, because so when you buy a sewing pattern, because you described all the stuff that goes into it, does a sewer then know how to approach those pieced patterns, to make the adjustments they need for themselves? Is that something you feel like sewers know that knitters don't, or do sewers just say, well, I'm not going to buy that pattern?
I think sewers are more willing to make alterations. Because I think that, you grow up, I mean, over here, you can take basic alterations to the dry cleaners. They often have, that's there. They often, many dry cleaners in the UK, and they have.
That's how it used to be in the US, but not anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We still have it here. But yeah, you can take it there, or you can take it to a specialist tailor if you want to. And I think the idea of altering sewn clothes is something that is up more to the forefront of people's minds. And
so you're saying, sorry, just to be clear, so you're saying they sew it as is and then get it altered, or they alter the
no, they can alter it before they go. I mean, people, I think with sewing, they don't normally, so people do make toiles or pre-tests, but because that takes longer, and I think people often just get used to certain pattern companies, whether they're closer to their body measurements or whatnot. But I think most of the time people are quite willing to alter things.
And that makes sense, what you just said about patterns, because we know that for finished garments, we know that like, oh, this shoe brand runs large.
Yeah.
So that makes sense for patterns if people start to get a sense of that.
Yeah, exactly. But again, you only get that with experience. I mean, I have about 3-ish of the sewing pattern companies that I will bother with, because they are fair. I don't have to do quite so much work. There are some alterations that I have to do just because of how I'm built, but after a while, and it's because, and it does take time and expense and fabric to find that out. But you can reuse fabric just like you can reuse yarn. And again, like you, I think most of my fails were in the sewing world rather than the knitting world, because I have had more experience with it. And I think
Brenda just said, as a sewer, I've learned how to make patterns fit. Now, as a knitter, I'm trying to understand the underlying relationship so I can get the knitted garments to fit. And I think that's, to your point of a pattern just being a series of words, where we lose that connection. And so that's why both in my in-person classes and in the video sweater classes, I'm all about, we start with the schematic. That's the blueprint of what you're building.
Yes.
And then we do sweater mapping, which is basically, I was inspired by Japanese sweater patterns, where you start by just a blank schematic. And now I'm going to plug in like the numbers that I want. And the whole idea of what you said in that blog, which is, this is your starting point. You
That is a
find the size
beautiful
that's your
system.
starting point.
That is a lovely system. Just like plug and play. I like that one.
Yeah, and so different. So every sweater will have different guidance. Like obviously, something like this is way more complicated, but even that, I'll explain. Like, okay, what creates the depth? Well, the neckline is built into the cable, so you have to count back from blah blah blah. Whether or not this, if your row gauge is off, how we find, okay, if I want that shaping to be the same, then I need to say, okay, count up the rows in the pattern, divide by the pattern gauge. Great. Now I know how many inches are in that shaping zone. Multiply that by my row. But something like this, all over stitch count, all over, this is so customizable because this is one stitch throughout. So the thing that you wrote about shape, and there can be 20 people with the same high chest measurement, and oh good, this one fits me in the shoulder.
Yeah.
And each one has a different body shape. Yeah. So like I had a question today about, well, what do I do if my waist is larger than my chest? What should I do? This has got waist shaping. And that's a little more complicated because I said, first, let's get the right measurement. Are you talking your natural waist or your belly?
Yeah.
Because my natural waist is 30, but if I wrap the tape measure around my belly, well, that's 36 because our belly's under our waist.
Exactly.
So, I explained, well, then how in the world could this 34 sweater fit me if I've got a 36-inch belly? But it does, because the hip measurement is meant to be larger, it floats away. And just as I'm past my danger point is when we're, nipping in. But I really hope everyone reads it and is inspired to know that it's not a badly written pattern or a pattern that doesn't fit me or a pattern that doesn't suit my shape. It's your starting place.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a lot to do with relationships, isn't it? I mean, describing it in terms of shape, like say you're describing a triangle, there are relationships within that shape. There are 3 lines. You have internal angles that add up to this. It's a series of connections. And I think that, I don't know, somehow it's lost with knitting patterns. I love how you had that mapping technique. That sounds amazing.
It's for people like me. I don't know if I have a map handy here, but I'm a visual person. So I'm also lazy, so I don't like carrying around words. So I've always, even before I used it for alteration, we learn how to do sweater mapping also to understand the pattern, even if we're not going to do anything to change it, because then you're walking around with just a single map that has numbers. Okay, I cast on this many, I work this many rows. Now hash marks for, this. And so one little schematic, just like a Japanese sweater pattern. You don't need to read Japanese to knit a Japanese.
Yeah.
We have too much of this in our patterns.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a challenging one. I think getting people to think about shape, how they relate, it's relating their shape to the instructions put in front of them. I think the presentation of patterns, I mean, on one hand, if you have something that's a pattern repeat, and you have to write that out. You have to sometimes be very specific in your instructions about what you need to do to get from A to B, especially if you've got simultaneous shaping, like a neck at the same time as the armhole. You have to be precise and you have to write that out normally. But I think that saying something about where those checkpoints, where those landmarks are, that jumper that you were talking to me about earlier, where you wanted the V to fall at exactly that point level with the armhole, then that's a landmark, isn't it? Because you're saying, okay, so long you can, so there's a bit of freedom in the pattern. Say if you're knitting, you get up to the armhole and you said, right, the V needs to be shut there, that's the convergent point, and as long as you hit that, then that's the main thing. It's picking out the main styling details in the pattern, what makes it successful, and then figuring out how you need to customize it to make it look the same way on you. because if we're all different shapes, then we can't all follow the same instructions blindly to get the jumper that fits
Right.
beautifully. I mean, when I did a few tutorials for the patterns that I just self-published, Bonnie and Anita, and for both of them, I wrote some detailed notes on how to lengthen and
They're
shorten.
so cute.
And oh, thank you.
I love the kind of vintage vibe of them.
Thank you.
They're so cute.
Yeah, I mean, but it's, you know, I like those neat shapes, and I feel like, you know, if you get the fit right, you can wear most things. Most of the time when people feel they don't look so good in things, it's because they don't fit. And that has nothing to do with what size you are necessarily. It's about whether or not something is, you know, in alignment, is in harmony with your shape, your contours, that kind of thing. And, you know, and it's about picking out those spots in the pattern where you can, you know, tweak things to suit you without necessarily undermining the design. Because I feel like, you know, sometimes things are too prescriptive, or I don't know, I think maybe people approach knitting patterns like that. Maybe people are very used to seeing knitting patterns like that. I mean, for the Anita pattern, that's a big long file. I mean, that is about 22 pages long, separate from the modifications document. There are, yeah, I know. My technical editor, she was, I hope she doesn't mind me saying this. She said, this is a really long pattern. She wasn't having kittens, but she was a bit like,
who's your tech editor? Are you allowed to tell me? Tell me later. Message me later. I always love to talk to tech editors because they're so different style wise.
Yeah. Oh no, she is lovely, but that pattern, it was a monster, because I was putting that level of detail into it, and I was thinking about it, and I thought, well, you know, that one is a wrap cardigan. As we all know, with wrap cardigans, they have to fall just right so that they look nice. And, you know, the crossover has to be in the right spot. And because of the waist shaping on it, that has to hit in the right spot. And so I was really thinking about, you know, how you get to that point. How do you customize it? And then also within that, I was building in with the two variations, different shapes. So one of them comes in, it has more of a taper between the bust and the waist. The other one goes more straight down. So you can still wear the wrap cardigan, but not feel like you want to be too winched in necessarily. And so I thought, well, this is the kind of, you know, support I think that people need, or need to have exemplified, so that they can find their way into patterns and see what's happening. And again, with the schematics, I have, the sleeve is the same, obviously, on both of them. I didn't do much with the sleeve, but the bodices, I made, they have a lot of annotation on them. You can see them on the listing. I said, right, I want to have the drop from here to here. I want to have the circumference here. I want to have this measurement, that measurement, just that people can see, you know, if you do X rows in rib, this is how deep it's going to be. Now, do you want the rib that deep? Do you want it to be, you know, do you need the pattern to be longer? Do you want the, I don't know, you know, just getting people to imagine.
Yeah. And then I always talk about row gauge because, like, sometimes it's hard to understand what here, and it's very, counterintuitive. So a knitter's not going to know that if I don't explain it. What controls the length would be the width. So the number of stitches inside this triangle will control the length of the sweater.
Yeah.
Because of the way the shaping is. So the modifications were where you start that triangle. Do you move it? You know, so how many stitches are outside the triangle, right? But the level, let me ask you this, because this is, I really go back and forth about this. How do you feel about, I have this discussion with Kate where Kate said, although I noticed on Kate's sweater, she didn't do this. Kate said, oh, the schematic should be one of the pictures on Ravelry. And I was like, well, but that's the design. I mean, that's almost giving away a giant part of the design, is how every single, and it was funny because I did call her on it, because I was like, hey, Kate, your motorcycle jacket, your schematic's not on Ravelry. And she's like, oh yeah, good point. So, but then I also see the advantage of it after reading your article. So now I just don't know. I mean,
I've put mine up there and the measurement table, and so
the actual schematic or just the like.
No, the schematic, the whole thing as it appears in the pattern. Yeah.
Wow.
So I had that, and I had it tabulated as well in centimeters and inches, so people can see the base that I'm working from, my own blocks that I developed for the 12 sizes for the pattern.
And I mean, that's a free picture on Ravelry. So before purchasing it, you see, wow.
Yeah, you see that before. So you've got the main modeled photos of the garment, and then after about, I think it was about 5 or 6 of those, I then went on to the schematic and then the measurements are the 2 last documents. And I thought, well, I will see what people do if they respond to them, because, you know, if you want more information up front about how the pattern's meant to fit and how to, and, you know, to prompt people to think about, you know, what they measure and what the pattern measures and how they might want it to fit, just to get them thinking about that in advance. So I thought I'll put it up there. See if anybody.
I'm going to start thinking about that. I mean, these are good points. I've always been nervous about it because it felt like giving away the design for free, because so much of the design is your knowledge to grade it in size, you know, and how you, but I see your point. It's very interesting. But can I tell you what I think you've done bravely and well, and to be true to yourself, which is not to talk too much about how the sausage is made, but your pricing. You have not, I said this to you before we went live, that I read the article about everything that went into those 2 new designs. And then you said, so I've drawn, you know, schematics with notes about how you might tailor this. And there's modification documents and there's some video tutorials. And I'm thinking, oh God, I can't believe she's putting all this in an $8 pattern. This is going to kill me. And I click through to see the pattern. And I was like, well, good on you then. No, it's not $8 because it shouldn't be.
No.
So it's 12 something sterling. I forgot what the.
Yeah, 12.50. Yeah.
12.50 stuff in pounds, which comes out to be just shy of $18, which is what it should be.
Yeah. Because
it's not just a pattern with fixed sizes. You are providing the tools for someone to. So I think that is a big discussion in our industry, where quilting and sewing and weaving, even all the other crafts, prices have continued to keep in line with the market.
Yeah.
In knitting, the prices of our technical editors have gone up. Our copy editors have gone up.
Yeah.
The graphic design pattern layup has gone up. Photography has gone up. Then there's now all the technical, the hosting services, because now I host everything on my own website. So people who can't access Ravelry, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, pattern prices have been frozen in time for 20 years. And something's got to give.
Yeah.
So I bless you with every fiber of my being.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I thought I knew how much I wanted to charge, and I thought, well, you know, after writing From Needle to Needle, I thought no one can say they didn't see it coming. You can't tell me, you can't expect me to sell a vlog patterns for seven quid after writing about sustainability and, you know, valuing people's labor and things like that, because, you know, the horrible thing about the time that we are in is that labor is just cheapened so much. You've got horrible working conditions, 0 hours contracts, and we're dealing with that legacy worldwide, never mind just in the knitting industry. And I just thought, you know, people will probably say it's expensive, and relatively only it's expensive.
After reading what's in there, I think it's cheap. I think it's an incredible bargain. And next year, you'll probably need to edge those prices up a wee bit. That's an incredible bargain for what you put in there. It's an insane amount of work that you put in. You built a class.
Yeah. Well, sorry?
You basically built a class and put it inside a pattern. You know,
Yeah.
it's a class on fit inside a pattern.
Yeah. That's what you have to give people. I mean, you show them how it's valuable. I mean, I would rather people, you know, if anyone thought my stuff was expensive, I would rather they just waited or saved money, put money aside if they can't afford it. I mean, with the commerce situation I have, I can't do nice things that other people do with them, pay what you can afford, because that involves adding on to the price. All these e-commerce things are freemium models, which is really irritating. But, you know, you have to show people where the value is. I'd rather that, you know, pay, you know, you get what you pay for, don't you? I would rather spend more on a pattern, having confidence that I'm going to get support with it.
Right.
I can contact the designer directly, because anyone who buys my patterns gets my email address. They can contact me anytime with stuff, and I will answer, because they have that direct line to me. It's not a cheap pattern that means, you know, that they're going to be confused about things. I hope I've got everything explained really clearly. And I thought this is the very least that I can do, because, you know, if you've worked for a young company as well, if anyone's working in a knitting shop will know the immense amount of labor that these people do for things that they don't even necessarily sell in their shops, helping people who have bought free patterns or cheap patterns. And they don't realize that what they don't spend in money, they eat up in time.
Right.
So you have to decide, you know, is it worth paying a bit more for something that is going to go really smoothly, or am I going to pay for something that is relatively cheap that might be a bit higgledy-piggledy, this, that, and the other, that you might be cursing towards the end? So it's more of a value proposition than anything else. I don't want it to be seen as an expense. It's more like it's fair.
But I think the knitter's time also has a value. So your point of, I buy an $8 pattern that I have to keep ripping back and try to figure out, and no, that doesn't make sense. And then I have to rewrite that whole section of the pattern to make it make sense, because that math didn't work and there's math errors, or, you know, I have to, well, now I, the knitter, have put an insane amount of my own personal work into that pattern. Probably knitted fewer things in the time, because I've had to spend all that time doing the work. But the other thing about when I read everything you put into it, the other thing that I think people need to understand about why certain patterns cost what they do is, like Affinity or this guy and all the work that went into it, I can't generate other income, because a regular, like 8 sizes, grade, hit print might take me however long that takes. But Affinity took about 8 months from sketchpad to on sale exclusively. That was literally all I was working on, because it was a cardigan and a pullover, 12 sizes, unisex, and a child size version with 4 sizes, cardigan and pullover. Yeah, the most insane thing I've ever made. And I wildly underpriced it.
Yeah.
And that was a huge mistake, because that needed to be the income source for 8 months of work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the other point you made about labor is interesting, cheap labor, because this came up in my conversation with Kate about yarn, how everyone has to make the decisions that are right for them, but we have to make the decisions knowing what the trade-off is. So there is zero judgment for people that want to spend $900 on a sweater that was spun by angels. And there is zero judgment for people that need, based on what's going on in their life, to go to the big box store and buy the you know, big box brand.
Yeah.
But we have to understand that the big box brand can be priced the way it is, sometimes because of child labor, sometimes because of mills that do not have the work environment we would wish it to have, versus a company, you know, like Anzula, which is all American made, Green Mountain Spinnery, where, you know, they want to make sure that they pay their staff well, so everything's a trade-off.
Yeah. That's it. And I think again with that, it comes with a change in consumer habits as well. I think I felt that one of the mistakes that, the hand knit industry made was trying to keep pace with fast fashion. I think
Mm.
I think at one point, I think Rowan Yarns, they were churning out so many pattern books and launching different yarns each season. And
Oh, good
it felt
point.
like such a weird thing to do, considering how much time knitting actually it takes to make a knitted garment. And it's just like, well, why are you doing that? I mean, it doesn't fit in with the pace of the craft, the hobby, what you know about your customers from so many years. And so it was trying to just force it to become something it wasn't. And
I never thought about it that
realistically,
way.
if you were going to knit a jumper for that year, you might get in, depending on how fast you are, you could get in one comfortably. You might get in maybe another one or two more whilst it's still cold. But really, it's such a slow cycle when you think about it. There's no need to be running off and spending lots of money every month on patterns, especially if you are the kind of person who knits garments. Now, I'm speaking from a garment perspective because that's my happy place. I like accessories, but I came
Yeah, me
up with
too.
clothes and that's what I'm going to stick with. So I'm looking at it from that perspective. Obviously, hats and things like that, completely different kettle of fish, and I'm not going to get into that because it's not my jam. But the sweaters, you're not going to make that many in the space of a year. It's an ongoing thing. It's like
So don't you want them to fit and be beautiful and be something you're proud of and wear forever?
yeah. Just take your time and make it and get it right. Pick something that you really, really like, because you're going to be spending such a long time making it. It's going to be your spare time on the sofa when you could be spending it with people you love. And, for the sake of this jumper that's going to work, because let's face it, when you get that favorite sweater, you wear it to death, don't you? Because it's perfect, it fits, and you love it more because you took the time and energy to get it just right.
I've worn this every day since I got it off the needle.
Yeah, and it shows because you glow in it. It's a lovely, lovely jacket.
So
It
comfortable.
has big pockets. It has that lovely collar that you can just go like that in.
Yeah, I can go outside and wear it as a coat on a warmer day. In a colder day, I made it large enough that I could wear a sweater under it.
Yeah,
It's got enough ease. Yeah, no,
exactly. And that's how I want people to feel if they knitted one of my patterns. That's how I think everybody should feel when they make a sweater or a cardigan for themselves. And yeah, the size and shape thing does feed into it because you need to cater for everybody as far as possible. But what I would really like to feel more confident in is that knitters are happy to take the time and hold their money back for things that they can trust to turn out the way that they want to. That's what I
really
think.
interesting ways to frame things that I haven't thought about. Like, first of all, to be able to really remind people that this is slow fashion and
Yeah.
this is a gift you give yourself. And why are we, rushing through it? But I also really like of the idea that, say there's a really fancy restaurant, or not even fancy, but great restaurant that's maybe a little expensive.
Uh-huh.
That might not be your every week diner, but you might save up for that because I really want to go there.
Yeah.
So the idea of consuming less,
Mm.
but more mindfully.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to buy 20 patterns. I'm going to buy 8 that I love, that are
Yeah.
worth it.
Yeah.
I don't know why I've never thought of framing it like that. This is very interesting.
Yeah.
You're a genius.
Thank you. My mum would thank you for saying that.
when we're in the after times,
Hmm.
well, or rather in the before times, did you come to the States much?
I've never visited the States, no. I know. I've got family in Toronto as well. I'm sure I've got family in the States as well that I've only ever seen on screens. I know. I would
Well,
love to
in
come
the
over.
after times, maybe we could, my brain is just swimming, thinking it would be so nice to have you teach at Affinity one year. My virtual retreat, my real in-person retreat. It was virtual this year. My retreat in Maine. Boy, I'd love to. have you lure you
I'll
to the States
start
someday.
saving now.
That would be kind of amazing. We should talk. 2022. I have the dates.
Okay.
Anyway, oh my God, it's 3:10. I can't believe we talked for more than an hour. I'm just looking back at the comments. So Chris made an interesting point. She said part of what happens is that there are so many people underpricing their work. When someone puts a real value on their work, it seems shocking.
Yeah.
And I think that is such an important point.
Yeah, it is.
When we are in the middle of when professional designers who do this for a living to pay our bills, to pay our mortgage, and we put in the work accordingly, are grouped in with all the people that have a full-time job, have a real job, do it as a hobby, and they're like, here's a $6 pattern, or here's a free pattern. It's hard to, Ravelry has given us so much, but one of the things that it's taken away is not really having the knitter be able to understand in this big group of published patterns, which are the professional ones.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah,
that is kind of tricky.
Yeah.
Marcia said, I think yarn companies depend on people who start all their sweaters and finish one or two. Also people who are just buying yarn and stashing it. Yeah, I mean, we were talking before about yarn companies, and that part of what's difficult about charging money for patterns is the yarn companies give the patterns away for free because they're there to support the yarn sales.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
there, the product is the yarn, not the pattern. But here we're making the product the pattern. It's like what people say about Facebook: whenever there's no product, the product is you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow, this is the most comments. By the way, after you log on later, these comments won't be there right away.
Okay.
It takes YouTube a couple of hours for the live comment stream to then go on to the recording. But then in a couple hours, you'll be able to go on. And this is the chattiest comment stream I've seen. Sue says it's extremely important because our shapes prevent us from basing sizes knit from the chest measurement. It's true.
Yeah, that is a difficult.
Great article, Natalie.
I love what you said about, sorry, Patty, about the shoulders being important, because that's it. They hang, your garments hang from the shoulders. It's the same in dressmaking. They support everything. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was my thing with they're not really, knitwear is often graded for sort of the average bust person. It's all, it's like what Amy Herzog calls Ms. Average, right? Everything's for Ms. Average. But that's hard math. From the armpit up, that's the Pythagorean theorem. So no one wants to touch that. So just get your base size to fit there. You don't have to do the armpit up math, because the armpit down math is easy.
Yeah.
I write a blog. It's called Cookie Math. So the blog is called Cookie Math. Maybe I'll link to it. It's I do a whole thing about, like, you wouldn't freak out over the math if I said you have 10 cookies on a plate. You have 5 friends coming over. How many cookies does each friend get? Okay, 2. Great. So your cookie portion is 2. Okay, now with your cookie portion of 2, you want to invite 6 friends. How many cookies do you need to bake? Oh, 12. Okay, great. So you figured out that very complex math. Okay, now you have 6 friends. You have 7 friends coming over, and you want to change your cookie portion to 3. How many cookies do you have to? Like these, when it's cookies, everyone can do the math. As soon as we call it stitches or inches, they freak out. So I remind all my knitters, this is cookie math. That's it.
That is a lovely way of putting it. I love that. Cookie math.
Oh, it's cookie math. I'll put Cookie Math link down here. So I'm going to put a link to your website where we can get everything from there, right? I saw links to your patterns there, your blog. There's how to follow you on Instagram. So like if they get to your website, they get to
Everything, yeah. Everything is there. That's my little home on the internet. My patterns are on Ravelry just as as part of the directory. You can't necessarily buy them from there. You have to go to my little site. It's on there.
Right. Like even the patterns that are only available on my website, they're listed on Ravelry, but if you click through, you can.
Exactly.
Oh, someone just said Megan, exactly. So I want to see what Megan said. Megan said, my 6'4" husband and 5'2" mother have the same chest measurement. Do you think they fit in the same sweater? That's an awesome way to put it. I think you should steal that quote. I think you should steal Megan's quote for Twitter and be like,
Megan, that is
Megan made an excellent point on the YouTube live. She said, and then link to your article. Megan, we're stealing that because that's really good. Oh, yes, you came in late, but you can watch the recording. Yes, the recording will all be up there. So this will all be up on YouTube with the comments that come in later and the subtitles come in later. So before I let you go, because this is you know what? This is the longest I've talked to anyone since I think the one I did with Kate.
I have no idea what time it is over here. I haven't had dinner yet. I mean,
we have been talking for an hour and 15 minutes.
Is that all?
It seems like longer. God, I can't wait to get out of here. She has been going on and on. No, I could talk to you all day.
Same.
This
has been so much fun.
You have made my brain, you've really given me so much to think about in the past couple months. And the interesting thing is, it's not even the what you're saying, because the what you're saying is all the stuff that I've been saying for years. But it's the how you're saying it. You're framing it. You're making me think about communicating it differently. Like what you just said about fast fashion. Mm-hmm. That's like, I don't know why I've never drawn that connection, but, and I think it comes from, your background, your sewing, we all come from these different perspectives where we can see the forest through the trees in a different way. Yeah. So we might all be seeing like a corner of this tree, and then this person over here sees a corner of this tree. And if we just keep listening to all these voices, we might be able to see the forest. But exactly. You've really helped me see the forest and all these, in the needle to needle posts, the current one, just was talking to you now. I'm just really grateful. I'm so grateful for everything that you are doing and the time that you're taking. Every designer should be sending you flowers right now.
Oh, Patty, that's lovely. I mean, that's such a nice thing to say, because I mean, the things you write these things, and you can get into the trap of spending a lot of time in your head, because you hit publish on the blog and you just think, okay, it's gone now. Let's just see you have to see what happens, and you're just hoping to just try and connect with people, even if it's just one person. Will anybody read it? And you genuinely don't know how it will go. So the fact that I have found like-minded people who like getting a glimpse of what goes on between my ears is a blessing, basically, especially when I get to talk for over an hour with
it's been amazing.
Yeah,
everything you've written has been amazing. I'm so spectacularly grateful for the time that you've taken to write about things that I have not bothered to write about. And also it's brave, because a lot of us feel like, oh, well, I can't say that. People are going to think I'm complaining, or, but it never sounded like that. It never sounded like I feel, and that's your skill as a writer. I feel like if I wrote the same blog, it would come off like I'm whining, or it would come off like I'm complaining, and it never, ever came off like that in your writing.
No, I mean, I'm really glad too, because I'm not complaining. I just want to point stuff out.
And no apology. You're just like, this is what it is. Yeah. These are the facts. Aw, Sue says, thank you again. I've updated my calendar to reflect the new moniker. This is the new name, Knit On with Patty. So speaking of Knit On, we do have something that we always say as we end our broadcast to keep each other fit and well. And it has changed and grown and evolved during our quarantine. It has gotten longer and longer and longer. But for those of you who know it, it's a 30-second delay, so I always warm up to it. You may type it in the notes, but we always end by saying, wash your hands, don't touch your face, wear your mask, get vaccinated. I've added recently, knit on. So knit on and keep doing what you're doing. I love your new designs. They're the cutest. I think you should do some little notes about like different style ideas, like, because they are so dress it up or dress it down. Like I could see them with, you know, like stiletto heels and a pencil skirt, or jeans and flats.
Yeah.
That's just my 2 cents. Anyway.
No, I'm glad you're seeing what I'm seeing. It makes me really happy. It does.
Thank you 1,000 times for keeping me company. And I am going to lure you to America one day. You just have to look at prices of flights and make sure that you're not too jet lagged. But I really want to talk to you about that. But first I have to get through this year's. I have to survive this year's, and then I'll turn my attention to next year's. But
thank you so much for inviting me on, Patty. It has been wonderful. I've enjoyed this evening so much. Afternoon for you, obviously, but this has been so much fun. So much fun.
Thank you so much. I hope I didn't talk too much, but you made me all excited and you got my wheels turning about a lot of things. So I know I have a tendency, I'm worse than Dick Cavett. When Dick Cavett used to always interrupt his guests when he was really excited about something they said, and he would immediately interrupt. And I'm worse than Dick Cavett when it comes to that. And I'm fully aware. But anyway. All right. Thank you so much. Say goodbye to the nice people.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you.
Knit on.